Vincent Moretti grabbed Emily by the throat and shoved her against the wall in front of every man in the room. "You are nothing, say," he snarled, his fingers tightening around her neck. "You breathe because I allow it. You exist because I find you useful. The moment I don't, you disappear." He released her and she dropped to the floor gasping. 20 men watched. Not one moved. Not one spoke. Vincent straightened his tie, smiled, and said, "Now go get my coffee." Emily stood up slowly. She wiped the blood from her lip. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She memorized every face in that room, every single one. If you want to see what satisfying thing Emily did next, subscribe to my channel and follow this story to the very end. Comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now let's begin. The call came at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. Emily Rivers was sitting alone in her apartment, eating cold pasta from a container, reviewing shipping manifests she wasn't supposed to have. Her phone buzzed once, then again, then a third time in rapid succession, which meant it was him. She picked up on the fourth buzz. "Yes, Mr. Moretti?" "My office, now." His voice was flat, no anger, no warmth, just command. "It's almost midnight." "Did I ask you what time it was?" The line went dead. Emily set the pasta down, closed the laptop, and stared at the wall for exactly 3 seconds. She had learned long ago that 3 seconds was all she could afford. 3 seconds to feel whatever she needed to feel. Anger, exhaustion, resentment, and then it was time to move. That was the deal. That had always been the deal. She drove 19 minutes through rain-slicked streets to the warehouse district where Vincent kept his real office. Not the polished downtown suite with the leather chairs and the view of the skyline. The other one, the one with no windows and 2 armed men standing at the door who never spoke and never smiled. "He's waiting," one of them said, stepping aside. She walked down the narrow hallway, her heels clicking against concrete. The sound echoed. Everything echoed in this building. That was intentional. Vincent liked people to hear footsteps. He liked knowing exactly how far away someone was at all times. She pushed open the door. Vincent sat behind a steel desk, his jacket off, his sleeves rolled up. There was blood on his right hand. Not a lot, just enough to notice. He didn't explain it. He never explained things like that. "Sit down," he said. She sat. "I'm throwing a party this Saturday, the Belmont Estate. Everyone will be there. Caruso, the Della Croce family, the people from the Port Authority, a few senators. You know the list." Emily nodded. She always knew the list. She had built the list. "I want you there." This was new. In 4 years of working for Vincent Moretti, Emily had never attended a single social event. She handled logistics. She managed schedules. She coordinated shipments that moved through ports at 3 in the morning and were never recorded on any official document. She was the person behind every successful operation Vincent had run in the last 4 years. But she was invisible. That was the arrangement. "You want me there," she repeated, keeping her voice neutral. Did I stutter? "No, but you've never asked me to attend before. In 4 years." Vincent leaned back in his chair. He studied her the way he studied everyone, like he was calculating something. Like every human interaction was a math problem, and he was deciding whether the answer benefited him. "Things change," he said. "What things?" He smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. Vincent Moretti didn't do warm. It was the kind of smile a man gives when he knows something you don't and enjoys the advantage. "Just be there, 8 o'clock. Wear something appropriate." Emily stood up. She knew better than to push. With Vincent, pushing got you one of 2 things, silence or consequences. Neither was productive. She was almost at the door when he spoke again. "Emily." She stopped but didn't turn around. "Don't embarrass me." She walked out without responding. She didn't trust herself to respond, because what she wanted to say was something that would have ended her career and possibly her life. Instead, she got in her car, drove home, and sat in the dark for 45 minutes, thinking. 4 years she had given this man. 4 years of 18-hour days of solving problems that would have destroyed lesser organizations, of keeping her mouth shut when every instinct told her to speak. She had saved his operation from collapse at least 3 times. She had identified the rat in his organization 2 years ago, the one feeding information to the FBI, and she had handled it so cleanly that Vincent never even knew how close he had come to an indictment. She had restructured his entire financial network, routing money through 14 different shell companies across 6 countries, creating a system so sophisticated that even the forensic accountants at the Treasury Department couldn't untangle it. And what had she received in return? A salary, a title, assistant, and the privilege of being invisible. She thought about the night 3 months ago when Vincent had hosted a dinner for his inner circle. She had prepared everything, the guest list, the menu, the security arrangements, even the talking points Vincent used during his toast. And when the evening was over, when the guests had left and the tables were being cleared, one of Vincent's lieutenants, a man named Sal Benedetto, had turned to her and said, "Hey, sweetheart, can you get me another drink before you go?" Sweetheart, like she was a waitress, like she hadn't just orchestrated an evening that secured a $12 million deal. She hadn't gotten him the drink. She had looked at him with an expression that made him take a step back, and she had walked out. The next day, Sal's shipment from the port was delayed by 72 hours because of a paperwork error. Yeah, an error that had cost him $400,000. Sal never connected the two events. Emily made sure of that. That was how she operated, quietly, precisely, without fingerprints. But something about tonight's conversation felt different. Vincent's invitation wasn't generosity. Vincent didn't have generosity. Everything he did served a purpose, and Emily had spent 4 years learning to read those purposes like a language. The party invitation was a move on a chessboard. She just didn't know yet what game he was playing. The next morning, she arrived at the downtown office at 7 an hour before anyone else. She pulled the guest list for Saturday's event and studied it name by name. 214 people, politicians, business leaders, crime family, heads from 3 different organizations, international contacts from Europe and South America. This wasn't just a party. This was a summit disguised as a celebration. She cross-referenced the guest list with Vincent's recent meetings and phone records she had access to because she was the one who maintained them. A pattern emerged. Over the past 6 weeks, Vincent had met privately with the heads of the Caruso and Della Croce families, something he almost never did. He had also made 3 calls to a man named Alejandro Vega, a name Emily recognized as a major player in the Colombian supply chain. And last week, he had transferred $2 million to an account in the Cayman Islands that Emily had never seen before. Something was happening, something big, and Vincent was positioning her in the middle of it. At 9:15, Sal Benedetto walked into the office. He was a thick man with a permanent scowl and hands like cinder blocks. He had been with Vincent for 15 years and considered himself untouchable. "Morning, Emily," he said, barely glancing at her. "Sal, you hear about Saturday. I'm handling the logistics for Saturday." "No, I mean, did you hear you're going, like, attending?" "Vincent mentioned it." Sal laughed. It was an ugly sound. "That's rich. You at a party with the big boys. What are you going to do, take notes?" Emily looked up from her computer. She held his gaze for exactly 4 seconds. She had learned that 4 seconds was the precise amount of time it took to make a man like Sal uncomfortable without provoking a confrontation. "I'm going to do whatever Vincent asked me to do," she said evenly. "Same as you." Sal's smile faded. He grunted something and walked away. But Emily noticed something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. Not just dismissal, fear. A small amount, barely detectable, but it was there. Sal was afraid of what her presence at the party might mean. And if Sal was afraid, others would be too. Good. By Wednesday, word had spread through the organization. Emily Rivers was attending the Belmont party. The reaction was immediate and divided. Some of Vincent's people were confused. Others were suspicious. A few, the smarter ones, were nervous. Tommy Luca, Vincent's driver, and one of the few people in the organization Emily genuinely trusted, pulled her aside Wednesday afternoon. "Emily, what's going on? Why does the boss want you at this thing?" "I don't know, Tommy." "That's not like you. You always know." She looked at him. Tommy was 58 years old, a former boxer who had worked for Vincent's father before him. He was loyal, simple in his motivations, and completely incapable of deception, which was why Emily trusted him. In a world built on lies, a man who couldn't lie was invaluable. "I have theories," she said carefully. "Care to share?" "Not yet." Tommy rubbed the back of his neck. "Listen, I've been around a long time. I was around when Vincent's old man ran things. And I'll tell you something. When the boss pulls someone out of the shadows and puts them in the spotlight, it means one of 2 things. Either he's about to promote them, or he's about to sacrifice them. There's no in between. Emily let those words settle. She had already considered both possibilities. But hearing them from Tommy, a man who had watched this world devour people for 30 years, made them feel heavier. "Which one do you think it is?" she asked. Tommy looked at her with something that might have been sadness. "I think you need to be very, very careful on Saturday night." Thursday brought a development that changed everything. Emily was reviewing the seating arrangements for the party when her phone rang. The number was blocked. She answered anyway. "Miss Rivers." The voice was male, calm, and unfamiliar. "Who is this?" "My name is not important. What's important is what I'm about to tell you. Vincent Moretti is planning to use Saturday's party to announce a major restructuring of his organization. Several people will be promoted, several will be removed. And you, Miss Rivers, are at the center of it." Emily's hand tightened around the phone. "I'm going to need more than that. He's planning to announce you as his new underboss, publicly, in front of every major figure in the organization and their allies." The words hit her like a physical force. Underboss, the second most powerful position in the entire operation. It was unprecedented. No woman had ever held that position in any organization she knew of. The implications were staggering. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because not everyone is happy about it. There are people who will do anything to prevent that announcement from happening. And some of those people will be in that room on Saturday night." The line went dead. Emily set the phone down slowly. Her mind was already racing, cataloging threats, calculating risks, mapping out the political landscape of Vincent's organization with the precision of a military strategist. If what the caller said was true, and her instincts told her it was, then Saturday night wasn't just a party. It was a battlefield. She thought about who stood to lose the most. Sal Benedetto was the obvious answer. He had been angling for the underboss position for years, doing favors, building alliances, making promises. If Vincent passed him over for Emily, a woman who had been invisible for 4 years, Sal wouldn't just be angry. He would be humiliated. And humiliated men in this world were dangerous men. Then there was Marco Della Croce, the youngest son of the Della Croce family patriarch. Marco had been pushing for a merger between his family and Vincent's operation, a merger that would position Marco as Vincent's number 2. If Emily took that spot instead, the merger would collapse and Marco's ambitions with it. And finally, there was someone Emily hadn't considered until now, Vincent himself. Why would he do this? Why would he elevate her so dramatically, so publicly? Vincent never made a move without calculating every possible outcome. If he was making her underboss, it wasn't out of gratitude or recognition. It was because he needed something from her, something that required her to have power. And that meant whatever was coming next was bigger than anything she had dealt with before. Friday morning, Emily did something she had never done in 4 years of working for Vincent Moretti. She lied to him. "I need tomorrow afternoon off," she said, standing in his office doorway. "Personal matter." Vincent looked up. His eyes narrowed. "The day before the party, everything is handled. The caterers are confirmed, security is briefed, the guest list is finalized. I'll be back by 6 to oversee the final preparations." He stared at her for a long moment. "Fine, but Emily, when I said don't embarrass me, I meant it. Saturday night is the most important night of my career. Everything has to be perfect." "It will be," she said. She spent Friday afternoon in a place no one in Vincent's organization knew about, a small storage unit on the east side of the city. Inside that unit were 3 fireproof filing cabinets containing copies of every document, every transaction record, every communication that had passed through her hands in 4 years. She had been building this archive since her first week on the job. Not because she had planned to use it, but because she understood even then that in this world, information was the only real currency, and Emily Rivers intended to be very, very rich. She opened the first cabinet and pulled out a folder labeled Moretti versus Personal. Inside were records that would make the most hardened prosecutor weep with joy. Bank accounts, wire transfers, property deeds, communications with foreign nationals, and one particular document that Emily had discovered 18 months ago and had never told anyone about. A document that, if revealed, would not just end Vincent's career, it would end his freedom, permanently. She didn't want to use it. She had never wanted to use it. But Tommy's words echoed in her mind. Either he's about to promote you or he's about to sacrifice you. And Emily Rivers had not survived 4 years in the shadow of a monster, by leaving her fate in someone else's hands. She locked the storage unit and drove home. She had 24 hours. 24 hours to prepare for a night that would change everything. Not just for her, not just for Vincent, but for every person who had ever looked at her and seen nothing more than an assistant. Tomorrow night, they would see something very different. Tomorrow night, they would see the truth. Saturday morning arrived and Emily hadn't slept. Not because she was nervous, because she was preparing. She sat at her kitchen table with 3 phones in front of her, a laptop open to a financial tracking program, and a cup of black coffee she hadn't touched. She had spent the last 6 hours making calls to people Vincent didn't know. She knew. Confirming details Vincent didn't know existed, and reviewing a plan she had been building for 18 months without telling a single soul. At 6:15, her personal phone rang. "Tommy Luca." "You up?" he asked. "I never went to sleep." "Emily, listen to me. I heard something last night, something bad." She stopped typing. Tommy wasn't a man who used words like bad casually. In his world, bad meant someone was about to get hurt or someone was about to die. "Tell me," she said. "Sal had a meeting last night, after hours, at the warehouse on 10th Street. I wasn't supposed to know about it, but my cousin Paulie does security over there and he called me. Sal brought in 4 guys from out of town. Nobody recognized them. They weren't from any family we know." Emily's jaw tightened. "Who were they?" "Paulie didn't get names, but he said they were carrying, heavy, and Sal gave them photographs." "Photographs of who?" Tommy went quiet for a moment. "You, Emily. Photographs of you." The words landed like a punch to the chest, but Emily didn't gasp. She didn't panic. She closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds, the same 3 seconds she always gave herself, and when she opened them, her mind was already 10 steps ahead. "How many photos?" she asked, her voice perfectly steady. "Paulie said at least 5. Different angles. Some from outside your apartment. Some from the office." "Emily, these guys aren't here to scare you. Sal is planning something for tonight." "I know." "You know, what do you mean you know?" "I mean, I've known Sal was going to make a move. I just didn't know when." "Now I do." "Oh." Tommy's voice cracked. "Emily, you need to run. Get in your car, drive south. Don't stop until you hit the border. I have a friend in Tucson who can set you up with new papers. You can disappear." "I'm not running." "Tommy, then you're going to die tonight." Emily picked up her coffee and took a long sip. It was cold. She drank it anyway. "No, Tommy, I'm not going to die tonight, but someone might." She hung up before he could argue. By 8 o'clock, Emily had made 4 more calls. The first was to a woman named Grace Chen, a forensic accountant who had left the FBI 3 years ago under circumstances that were never fully explained. Grace owed Emily a favor, a significant one, and Emily was calling it in. "I need you to be ready to move tonight," Emily said. "The files I gave you 6 months ago, the ones in the blue folder, I need them uploaded to a secure server by midnight." "All of them?" Grace asked. "All of them. Emily, if those files go live, it won't just take down Moretti. It'll take down half the Port Authority and at least 2 sitting congressmen. I know exactly what they'll do." "And you're sure about this?" "I've never been more sure about anything in my life." The second call was to a man named Detective Ray Castillo, a 20-year veteran of the organized crime unit who had spent the better part of a decade trying to build a case against Vincent Moretti and failing every single time. Emily had been the reason he failed. She had been the one blocking his investigations, rerouting his informants, burying the evidence before it could surface. Ray Castillo didn't know that, but he was about to. "Detective Castillo, this is someone you've been looking for." "Who is this?" "I'm the person who's going to give you Vincent Moretti. Tonight, on a silver platter. But I need something from you first." There was silence on the line. Then Castillo said, "I'm listening. I need immunity, full immunity, for everything, non-negotiable. I can't promise that without knowing what you're offering. I'm offering you the case of your career. Bank records, wire transfers, shipping manifest communication logs, and a recorded conversation between Vincent Moretti and a United States senator discussing the sale of port access rights. I have 14 filing cabinets worth of evidence that your team has been trying to find for 10 years. I built the system, detective. I know where every single body is buried, some of them literally." Castillo's breathing changed. She could hear it through the phone. The sound of a man realizing that the thing he had chased his entire career was suddenly within reach. "Where do we meet?" he asked. "We don't, not yet. Tonight at the Belmont Estate, Vincent is hosting a party. Every major figure in his organization will be in one room. I need you to have a team ready to move on my signal. Not before. If you move too early, everything falls apart." "And what's your signal?" "You'll know it when you see it." She ended the call and stared at the wall. 2 moves down, 2 more to go. The third call was the most dangerous one. She dialed a number she had memorized but never saved in any phone. It rang 6 times before a voice answered in Spanish, then switched to English. "Miss Rivers, I wondered when you would call." "Mr. Vega, we need to talk about Vincent's proposal." Alejandro Vega laughed softly. "You know about the proposal?" "I wrote the proposal, Mr. Vega. Vincent just doesn't know that. The supply chain restructuring, the new routes through the Gulf, the pricing adjustments. All of it came from my desk." Vincent presented it as his own work because that's what Vincent does. He takes credit. It's the only thing he's truly good at. Vega was quiet for a moment. "You're a bold woman, Miss Rivers." "I'm a practical woman, Mr. Vega. And practically speaking, you're about to invest $40 million in a partnership with a man who can't run his own organization without me. So I'm offering you a better deal. Same terms, same routes, same pricing, but with me at the head of the table instead of Vincent. And why would I trust you over a man I've done business with for 12 years? Because in 12 years, Vincent has lost you money 3 times, missed deadlines twice, and nearly exposed your entire operation to federal investigators once. I'm the one who fixed all of those problems. Every single one. You've been doing business with me for 12 years, Mr. Vega. You just didn't know it." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'll be at the party tonight. We can discuss this further in person." "I look forward to it." The fourth call was the one that scared her, not because of who she was calling, but because of what it meant. She dialed her mother's number in Connecticut. It rang twice. "Emily, honey, it's early. Is everything okay?" Emily pressed her palm against her forehead. For the first time all morning, her composure cracked. Just slightly. Just enough for her voice to carry something that sounded almost like fear. "Mom, I need you to do something for me today. I need you to take Dad and drive to Aunt Carol's house in Vermont. Today. Not tomorrow. Today." "What? Why, Emily, what's going on?" "I can't explain right now. I just need you to trust me. Please. Take Dad. Go to Vermont. Stay there until I call you." "Emily, you're scaring me." "I know, I'm sorry, but I need you safe. Can you do that for me?" Her mother's voice trembled. "Yes, okay. Yes, we'll go. But Emily, whatever this is, please be careful." "I will, Mom." She hung up and pressed both hands flat on the table. She held them there until they stopped shaking. 30 seconds. That's how long it took. Then she stood up, walked to her closet, and pulled out the dress she had bought 3 weeks ago. Black, simple, expensive. Not the kind of dress an assistant wears. The kind of dress a woman wears when she wants every person in the room to understand that the rules have changed. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, the Belmont estate was swarming with activity. Caterers, security, florists, musicians. Emily arrived at 4:30 and immediately took control, directing staff checking sightlines, reviewing entry and exit points. She moved through the space with the efficiency of a general preparing a battlefield because that's exactly what it was. At 5:15, Vincent arrived. He walked through the front entrance with Sal Benedetto and 2 bodyguards. He surveyed the preparations with a critical eye, nodding occasionally, saying nothing. When he saw Emily, he stopped. "You look like you haven't slept," he said. "I haven't." "Dedication, I like that." He started to walk past her, then paused. "Tonight is important, Emily. More important than you know. Everything needs to go exactly as planned." "It will," she said, and she meant it. Just not the way he thought she meant it. At 6 o'clock, Sal Benedetto found Emily in the kitchen, reviewing the catering schedule. He leaned against the door frame and crossed his arms. "Big night for you, huh?" he said, smiling that ugly smile. "It's a big night for everyone, Sal." "Yeah, but especially for you, coming out of the shadows, playing with the big kids." He stepped closer. "You know what I think? I think Vincent's making a mistake. I think putting you in front of all these people is going to blow up in his face. And when it does, I'll be right there to pick up the pieces." Emily turned to face him. She looked him directly in the eyes. Sal, can I give you a piece of advice? From you, that's cute. Be careful tonight. Be very, very careful. Because the people who think they're picking up pieces usually end up becoming pieces themselves. Something shifted in Sal's expression. The smirk faltered. For just a moment, he looked at Emily and saw something he hadn't seen before. Something that made the confidence drain from his face like water from a cracked glass. He left without another word. By 7:30, the first guests began arriving. Black cars lined the circular driveway. Men in tailored suits and women in designer gowns filtered through the entrance, greeted by security who checked names against the list Emily had prepared. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the particular energy that fills a room when powerful people gather and none of them fully trust each other. Emily watched from a second-floor window as the cars arrived. She identified each guest as they stepped out. Franco Caruso, head of the Caruso family, 72 years old, diabetic, accompanied by his youngest son, Nico, who was rumored to be smarter than his father and twice as dangerous. Elena Della Croce, the matriarch of the Della Croce family, who hadn't attended a public event in 6 years and whose presence tonight meant something significant was about to happen. 3 Port Authority officials who arrived in a single car with government plates trying to look inconspicuous and failing completely. 2 senators who entered through a side door escorted by men who weren't their usual security details. And then at 7:55, a car she didn't recognize. A black Mercedes with diplomatic plates. The door opened and Alejandro Vega stepped out. He was smaller than she expected, 5'7", maybe 5'8", wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had never needed to raise his voice because the world bent to accommodate him without being asked. He looked up at the second-floor window, directly at her, and he smiled. Emily stepped back from the glass. Her heart was beating faster now. Not from fear, from anticipation. Every piece was on the board. Every player was in position. In less than 2 hours, the game she had been planning for 18 months would begin. And when it was over, nothing would be the same. At 8:15, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. 5 words. The 4 men are inside. Sal's hired guns. They were already in the building. Emily had expected this, but knowing it was real, knowing that somewhere in this house there were 4 armed men carrying her photograph, made the stakes feel suddenly brutally concrete. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. The black dress, the carefully styled hair, the face that had spent 4 years being invisible. She thought about the night Vincent had slammed his fist on the table and called her nothing. She thought about every dismissal, every insult, every moment she had been treated like furniture by men who couldn't run their own operations without her. Then she thought about what Tommy had said. Either he's about to promote you or he's about to sacrifice you. Emily opened her clutch and checked the small recording device she had hidden inside. Green light, active. Everything said within 10 feet of her, tonight would be captured, stored, and transmitted to Grace Chen's secure server in real time. She closed the clutch, straightened her shoulders, and looked at herself one final time. Neither, she whispered to her reflection. He's about to lose me. She walked out of the bathroom, down the hallway, and toward the top of the grand staircase. Below her, 200 of the most powerful and dangerous people in the country were drinking champagne and making deals that would never appear in any legal document. Vincent Moretti stood at the center of it all, holding court, shaking hands, smiling that cold smile. He didn't know that the woman standing above him had already made the calls that would destroy his empire. He didn't know that the detective he had evaded for a decade was parked 3 blocks away with a full tactical team. He didn't know that his most trusted supplier had already agreed to replace him. He didn't know that every word he had said in his office for the past 18 months had been recorded. He didn't know any of it because he had never bothered to look closely at the woman who stood in his shadow. He had never once considered that the person he treated like nothing was in fact the most dangerous person in his world. Emily took a breath. She placed her hand on the railing, and she began to descend the staircase. The first person to see her was Sal Benedetto. His glass stopped halfway to his lips. His eyes went wide. The second person was Franco Caruso, who leaned over to his son Nico and whispered something that made the younger man turn sharply toward the stairs. The third person was Elena Della Croce, who raised one thin eyebrow and for the first time in anyone's memory smiled. And then Vincent looked up. The room didn't go silent all at once. It happened in waves like ripples spreading across still water. Conversations died one by one as heads turned, as eyes followed the woman descending the staircase in a black dress that made it absolutely clear she was not here to take notes or fetch coffee or stand quietly in the corner while men decided the fate of empires. Vincent stared at her. His expression was unreadable, but Emily saw something flicker behind his eyes, something she had never seen there before. Doubt. She reached the bottom of the stairs. She didn't go to Vincent. She didn't wait for him to come to her. She walked straight past him directly toward Alejandro Vega and extended her hand. "Mr. Vega," she said loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Thank you for coming. I believe we have business to discuss." Behind her, she heard Vincent's sharp intake of breath. She didn't turn around. The night had just begun. Alejandro Vega took Emily's hand and held it for exactly 2 seconds longer than a normal handshake. He looked at her with eyes that had evaluated thousands of people across decades of dangerous business, and what he saw clearly impressed him. "Miss Rivers," he said, his accent soft but precise, "you are exactly as I imagined." "And how did you imagine me, Mr. Vega?" "Like someone who has been holding her breath for a very long time and is finally ready to exhale." Behind them, Vincent Moretti was already moving. Emily could feel him approaching without turning around, the way you can feel a storm shifting direction. His hand closed around her elbow, firm, but not quite painful. Not yet. "Emily," he said, his voice low and controlled. "A word." She turned to face him with a smile that gave away nothing. "Of course, Mr. Moretti. Mr. Vega, if you'll excuse me for just a moment." Vega nodded, his expression amused. He knew exactly what was happening. He had seen this kind of power struggle 100 times in 100 different countries. The only difference was that this time he was betting on the woman. Vincent steered Emily to a corner near the bar. His grip on her elbow tightened. His jaw was set so hard she could see the muscles jumping beneath his skin. "What the hell are you doing?" he whispered. "I'm greeting your guests. Isn't that why you invited me?" "I invited you to stand beside me, not to walk past me, not to approach Vega before I've had a chance to speak with him. Do you understand the message that sends?" Emily looked at his hand on her elbow. She looked at it long enough for him to notice that she was looking at it. He released her. "Vincent, I've spent 4 years making sure every message you send lands exactly the way you want it to. Every deal, every meeting, every negotiation. I've crafted the words, prepared the rooms, briefed you on every person you've ever sat across from. So yes, I understand messages. Better than anyone in this room, including you." Something dangerous flashed across Vincent's face. Not anger exactly. Recognition. The recognition of a man who has just realized that the tool he's been using has its own hands. "We'll talk about this later," he said. "Yes," Emily replied. "We will." She walked away from him, deliberately, slowly, making sure every person watching understood that she had just ended a conversation with Vincent Moretti on her own terms. It was a small thing, a tiny gesture, but in this world, small gestures were earthquakes, and the tremors were already spreading. At 8:32, Nico Caruso intercepted her near the east wall. He was 34, handsome in a dangerous way, with his father's sharp mind and none of his father's patience. He had been watching Emily since she descended the stairs, and his curiosity had clearly gotten the better of his caution. "I don't think we've met," he said, offering his hand. "Nico Caruso." "I know who you are, Nico. I arranged your father's last 3 meetings with Vincent. I also arranged for the security detail that prevented an attempt on your father's life in February. You're welcome, by the way." Nico's hand froze mid-shake. "That was you. The intelligence came from my sources. I identified the threat, I alerted your father's team, and I made sure the 2 men responsible were dealt with before they could get within a mile of him." Vincent took the credit, of course. Vincent always takes the credit. Nico pulled his hand back slowly. He studied her with new eyes. "My father thinks Vincent runs the tightest operation on the East Coast." "Your father is right. He's just wrong about who's running it." The words landed. She could see them register on Nico's face, the slight widening of the eyes, the almost imperceptible tightening of the jaw. He was recalculating, reassessing, doing exactly what Emily needed him to do. "I'd like to continue this conversation later tonight," he said carefully. "I'd like that too. Find me after Vincent makes his announcement. What announcement? Emily smiled. You'll know it when you hear it. She moved on, working the room with a precision that would have stunned anyone who had only ever seen her behind a desk. She wasn't socializing. She was executing a strategy, making contact with specific people in a specific order, planting specific seeds that would bloom at exactly the right moment. Every conversation was calculated. Every word was chosen. At 8:47, she noticed something that made her pulse spike. One of the four men Tommy had warned her about was standing near the service entrance. He was wearing a catering uniform, but his shoes were wrong. Caterers don't wear tactical boots. And caterers don't stand with their weight distributed the way a man stands when he's carrying a weapon under a borrowed jacket. Emily pulled out her phone and sent a text to Tommy. Service entrance, man in catering whites, tactical boots, confirm. 30 seconds later, Tommy replied, confirmed, I count two more, one near the kitchen, one on the second floor. Haven't found the fourth. Four men, three located, one missing. That was the one that worried her. She scanned the room and found Sal Benedetto standing with a group of Vincent's lieutenants. He was laughing, gesturing with his drink, performing ease. But his eyes kept darting to the service entrance, to the man in the tactical boots. Sal wasn't just nervous, he was managing a timeline. Something was going to happen, and it was going to happen soon. Emily needed to accelerate. At 9:05, she approached Elena Della Croce. The matriarch was seated in a high-backed chair near the fireplace alone, watching the room with the detached amusement of a woman who had seen empires rise and fall and had outlasted them all. She was 78 years old, rail-thin, with white hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin of her face. She had buried 2 husbands, 3 sons, and more enemies than anyone could count. In this world, Elena Della Croce was not just respected, she was feared. Mrs. Della Croce, Emily said, sitting beside her without being invited. A bold move. No one sat beside Elena without permission. Elena turned her head slowly. Her eyes were pale blue and absolutely merciless. You're the girl who walked past Vincent. I am. That was either very brave or very stupid. In my experience, those are usually the same thing. Elena's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. What do you want, child? An alliance. Elena laughed. It was a dry, papery sound like dead leaves scraping concrete. An alliance. With you. A woman who 24 hours ago was fetching coffee for a man who doesn't deserve it. Mrs. Della Croce, your grandson Marco, has been pushing for a merger with Vincent's organization. A merger that would make Marco the number 2 in the combined operation. But you and I both know that merger is a trap. Vincent doesn't want a partner. He wants to absorb the Della Croce family's territory, strip your grandson of real authority, and use your family's name as a front while he controls everything. Elena's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. And how would you know this? Because I drafted the merger agreement, the real one. Not the version Vincent showed Marco, the one with the equal partnership language and the shared governance clauses. I'm talking about the version Vincent keeps in his private safe. The one that gives him unilateral control over all combined assets after 18 months and includes a clause that allows him to remove any officer of the merged organization without cause or compensation. The silence between them was electric. Elena's hand resting on the arm of her chair had gone white at the knuckles. You've seen this document, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I wrote it, Mrs. Della Croce. Vincent told me exactly what he wanted, and I put it into legal language. Then I made a copy. I make copies of everything. Elena Della Croce stared at Emily for a long moment. Then she reached out and placed her hand on Emily's arm. It was the first physical gesture of warmth Emily had received from anyone in this world in 4 years. Tell me what you need, Elena said. When the moment comes tonight, and it's coming soon, I need you to stand with me. Not with Vincent, not with Sal, with me. And in return, the real merger, the equal one. Your family keeps its territory, its autonomy, and its dignity. And Marco gets a seat at the table. A real seat, not the puppet chair Vincent had prepared for him. Elena removed her hand from Emily's arm. She looked across the room at Vincent, who was shaking hands with a senator, smiling that plastic smile. Then she looked back at Emily. You remind me of myself, she said. 60 years ago, before I learned that the most dangerous thing in the world is a woman they refuse to see. Is that a yes? That's a yes, Emily stood, smoothed her dress, and walked away. Her heart was hammering, but her face revealed nothing. 3 allies secured: Vega, Nico Caruso, Elena Della Croce. 3 pillars of the old world now supporting her. The foundation was set. At 9:22, everything almost fell apart. She was crossing the room toward the bar when she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned and found herself face to face with a man she had never seen before. He was tall, broad, with a face that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. His eyes were flat and empty. "Miss Rivers," he said. "Who's asking?" "Mr. Benedito would like to see you in the library. Now." Emily's mind raced. This was one of Sal's 4 men, the missing 4th. He was right here, standing inches from her, his hand still on her shoulder. She could feel the hardness of a holster beneath his jacket pressing against her arm. "Tell Mr. Benedetto I'll find him when I have a moment." The man's hand tightened. He said now. Emily looked down at his hand, then she looked up at his face. She smiled, and when she spoke, her voice was loud enough to carry to the nearest group of guests. "I appreciate the invitation, but I'm in the middle of a conversation. Please tell Sal I'll come by shortly." The man hesitated. He hadn't been prepared for her to be loud. His instructions clearly involved discretion, and Emily had just made the interaction visible to at least 15 people, including Nico Caruso, who was watching with obvious interest. "Ma'am," the man started. "Thank you," Emily said firmly, removing his hand from her shoulder, with a gesture that was so casual, so effortlessly confident, that the man actually stepped back. He looked confused, like a dog whose leash had suddenly disappeared. He retreated. Emily watched him go, tracking his path through the crowd until he reached Sal near the kitchen. She saw Sal's face contort with frustration. He grabbed the man's arm and hissed something Emily couldn't hear but could easily guess. The plan was unraveling. Sal had expected to isolate her. Emily had made sure she couldn't be isolated. At 9:31, her phone buzzed. "Grace Chen. Files are uploaded. Everything is on the server, ready to go live on your signal. Stand by." Emily, once these go live, there's no taking them back. Every financial record, every communication, every transaction. Vincent Moretti's entire empire laid bare. The FBI, the IRS, the DOJ. They'll all have access within minutes. "I understand." "Do you? Because once you press this button, you can't unpick it. Everyone goes down. Everyone." Emily thought about that word. Everyone. It included people she cared about, Tommy, a few others who had shown her kindness over the years. Collateral damage. She had wrestled with this for months, trying to find a way to protect the innocent while destroying the guilty. She had done her best. She had warned Tommy. She had set up clean exits for the few people who deserved them. But she knew with the cold clarity that had become her defining trait that some good people would get hurt. That was the price. "I understand, Grace. Stand by for my signal." At 9:40, Vincent took the stage. He tapped a microphone and the room gradually fell quiet. 200 faces turned toward him, glasses in hand, expressions ranging from respect to fear to barely concealed contempt. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Vincent began. "This evening is about more than celebration. It's about the future. Our future." Emily positioned herself near the front of the crowd, directly in Vincent's line of sight. She wanted him to see her. She wanted him to look into her eyes while he said whatever he was about to say. "For years, I've built this organization on loyalty, strength, and vision. And tonight, I want to recognize someone whose loyalty and dedication have been extraordinary. Someone who has worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make everything you see around you possible." The room murmured. Eyes shifted. People were guessing, calculating, wondering. "Tonight I am proud to announce that Emily Rivers, my assistant and trusted confidant, will be taking on a new role within our organization." Emily watched his face. She watched for the tell. Vincent always had a tell when he was about to betray someone. His left hand would move to his jacket pocket, a small, unconscious gesture that preceded every double cross she had ever witnessed. "Emily will serve as my new underboss." The room erupted. Whispers became voices. Voices became exclamations. Sal Benedetto's face turned a shade of red that bordered on purple. Marco Della Croce grabbed his grandmother's arm. Franco Caruso turned to his son Nico with a look of genuine shock. But Emily wasn't watching any of them. She was watching Vincent's left hand. And there it was, the tell. His fingers brushed the outside of his jacket pocket just for a second, just enough. He was lying. The announcement was a trap. Everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Vincent hadn't invited her to elevate her. He had invited her to expose her. By publicly naming her underboss, he was doing two things. First, he was making her the most visible target in the room, drawing out every enemy, every jealous rival, every ambitious lieutenant who would rather kill than serve under a woman. Second, he was testing the room, watching who reacted with anger, who reacted with alliance, who revealed their true loyalties by how they responded to an announcement he never intended to honor. Emily was bait. The entire evening was a trap designed to use her as a lightning rod to expose the fractures in his organization so he could eliminate his real enemies. And when the dust settled, when the threats had revealed themselves, Vincent would withdraw the announcement, remove Emily from the picture, and consolidate his power. She was never meant to be underboss. She was meant to be a sacrifice. Tommy had been right all along, but Tommy hadn't accounted for one thing. Neither had Vincent. They hadn't accounted for the possibility that the sacrifice would refuse to die. Emily stepped forward. She lifted her chin. She looked directly at Vincent and said loud enough for every person in the room to hear, "Thank you, Vincent. I accept. And I have a few announcements of my own." Vincent's smile froze. His left hand stopped moving. For the first time in 4 years, Emily saw genuine surprise on his face. This was not in his script. This was not part of his plan. "First," Emily said, turning to address the room, "I want to thank Mrs. Elena Della Croce for her support and counsel over the past several months. Elena, your wisdom has been invaluable." Elena Della Croce raised her glass. The gesture was small, but its meaning was seismic. The most powerful matriarch in the room had just publicly aligned herself with Emily Rivers. Not with Vincent, with Emily. "Second, I want to welcome Mr. Alejandro Vega, who has traveled a great distance to be here tonight. Mr. Vega and I have been discussing some exciting new opportunities that I believe will benefit everyone in this room." Vega nodded. Another public alignment, another pillar shifting away from Vincent and toward Emily. Vincent's face had gone pale. He was doing the math. He was a smart man, brilliant even, and he could see the geometry of the room changing in real time. Alliances that had been his for decades were realigning around a woman he had treated like furniture. The ground was moving under his feet. "And third," Emily said, and now her voice dropped low, "intimate, dangerous, the voice of a woman who has been silent for years and is about to make the silence itself seem like a weapon. I want to address something that has been bothering me for a very long time." She turned back to Vincent. She looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a tumor, with clinical precision and zero sentimentality. "You once pressed my face against the floor and told me I was nothing. You told me I was a dog. You told me dogs don't sit at the table." The room went absolutely still. Not the silence of confusion, the silence of a held breath, the silence before an explosion. "I remember that night, Vincent. I remember every word. I remember the blood on my lip. I remember the sound of 20 men breathing who didn't lift a finger to stop you. And I remember standing up afterward and making a decision." She took one step closer to him. Just one, but it felt like the distance between two worlds collapsing. "The decision was this: I would let you believe I was nothing for as long as it took, for as long as I needed. And when the time came, I would show you and everyone who watched that night exactly what nothing looks like when it decides to become everything." Vincent's mouth opened. No words came out. Emily reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered over the screen. One tap, one signal, and 20 years of Vincent Moretti's empire would begin its collapse. She looked at him one last time. She wanted to remember this face, this exact expression. The expression of a man who has just realized that the most dangerous person in the room was the one he never bothered to look at. Emily pressed send. The moment Emily's thumb left the screen, three things happened simultaneously. Grace Chen's server pushed 14 filing cabinets worth of digital evidence to a secure cloud accessible by federal law enforcement. Detective Ray Castillo, parked 3 blocks away, received a single text that read, "Now." And every phone belonging to every corrupt official in that room buzzed with a notification from an anonymous source containing just enough information to make them panic, but not enough to make them run. Not yet. Emily slipped the phone back into her clutch. Her hand was steady. Her breathing was even. She had just detonated a bomb that no one in the room could hear yet, but the shockwave was coming. It was coming fast. Vincent recovered first. He always recovered first. That was what made him dangerous. Where other men would stammer or rage, Vincent Moretti simply recalibrated. His expression shifted from shock to composure in under 3 seconds, and when he spoke, his voice carried the same authority it always carried. Emily has always had a flair for the dramatic, he said to the room, forcing a laugh that almost sounded genuine. That's one of the reasons she's so valuable to this organization. Now, if everyone will excuse us for just a moment, he grabbed Emily's arm. This time, he didn't bother disguising the force. His fingers dug into her bicep as he pulled her through a side door into a narrow hallway that led to the estate's private study. 2 of his bodyguards followed. He shoved her inside and closed the door. "What did you just do?" His voice was quiet. The quiet voice was always worse than the loud one. "I told the truth, something you should try sometime." Vincent moved so fast she barely saw it. His hands slammed against the wall beside her head, not touching her, close enough to feel the air move. "I'm going to ask you one more time. What did you do?" Emily didn't flinch. She had trained herself not to flinch around this man. It had taken 2 years of practice, 2 years of swallowing every natural human instinct to recoil from violence, but she had done it. And now, standing inches from his rage, she felt something she hadn't expected. Nothing. She felt nothing. The fear was gone. It had been replaced by something colder, something harder, something that had been growing inside her since the night he pressed her face against the floor. "I did what you taught me to do, Vincent. I identified a weakness in the organization, and I exploited it." "What weakness?" The word hung in the air between them like a blade. Vincent's hand dropped from the wall. He took a step back, not because he was afraid, because he needed to think. Emily could see it happening, the machinery of his mind spinning, trying to calculate every possible angle, every possible move she could have made. "You don't have the power to threaten me," he said slowly. "You're my assistant. You have no allies. You have no leverage. You have nothing. I had nothing 4 years ago, that's true. But you made a mistake, Vincent. The same mistake powerful men have been making since the beginning of time. You put a person you considered beneath you in charge of everything that mattered. Your finances, your communications, your schedules, your secrets. You gave me the keys to your entire kingdom because you never believed I would use them. Because I was just the girl who fetched your coffee." Vincent's eyes narrowed. She could see him processing connecting dots running through 4 years of interactions in fast forward. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that for the past 18 months, I have copied every document that has passed through my hands. Every bank record, every wire transfer, every shipping manifest, every communication between you and every person in that room. I have recordings of phone calls you made from your office that you thought were private. I have photographs of documents you kept in your safe, a safe whose combination you changed every month, but whose new combination you always wrote on a sticky note and placed under your desk lamp because you could never remember numbers longer than 6 digits. Vincent's face drained of color, not slowly, all at once, like someone had pulled a plug. "You're bluffing." Account number, Bevan, 742, Cayman National Bank. Opened March 15th, 2 years ago. Current balance, $14.6 million. Shell company name, Meridian Coastal Holdings. Signatory, a man named Robert Fallon, who doesn't exist because I created him. I created the company, Vincent. I opened the account. I know every dollar that has moved through it because I moved every single one. Vincent sat down. He didn't choose to sit down. His legs simply stopped holding him. He dropped into a leather chair and stared at Emily with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not anger, not calculation, devastation. The expression of a man watching his world collapse in real time and understanding for the first time that he cannot stop it. "Why?" he whispered. Emily crouched down so she was at his eye level. She wanted him to see her face clearly. She wanted him to remember this moment for the rest of his life. "Because you pressed my face against the floor. Because you called me a dog. Because you told 20 men that I was nothing and not one of them disagreed. Because every single day for 4 years I walked into your office and gave you my best, my intelligence, my loyalty, my work, and you repaid me with contempt. You used me, Vincent. You used my mind to build your empire, And then you told the world I was nothing but a secretary. She stood up. But here's the part that should really scare you. I didn't do this out of revenge. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is messy. I did this because it was the logical thing to do. You are a bad investment. Vincent, you are a man who mistakes cruelty for strength and loyalty for weakness. The organization you built is brilliant, but you are not the reason it works. I am. And tonight, everyone in that room is going to find that out. At 9:51, the first sign of Sal's plan appeared. Emily heard a commotion from the main hall. Raised voices, something breaking. She moved toward the door, but one of Vincent's bodyguards stepped in front of her. The boss didn't say you could leave. Emily looked at the bodyguard. His name was Marco Ricci, 29 years old. Former military, had been with Vincent for 3 years. Emily knew his mother's name, his girlfriend's address, and the fact that he sent $400 to his sister in Ohio every month to help pay for his nephew's medical bills. She knew everything about everyone. That was the point. Marco, in about 15 minutes, federal agents are going to enter this building. When they do, everyone with a weapon is going to be face down on the floor. I can make sure your name isn't on the arrest list, or I can make sure it is. Your choice. Marco stared at her. His hand moved to his earpiece, then stopped. He looked at Vincent, who was still sitting in the chair staring at the floor. Then he looked back at Emily. He stepped aside. Emily walked out of the study and back into the main hall. The commotion was worse than she expected. Sal Benedetto was standing in the center of the room with 2 of his hired men flanking him. The third was blocking the main entrance. Guests were backing away, creating a wide circle around Sal, who was holding a glass of whiskey and wearing the expression of a man who had decided to burn everything down. "Where is she?" Sal bellowed. "Where is the little secretary who thinks she can play with the big boys?" Emily stepped into the circle. "I'm right here, Sal." The room contracted, 200 people holding their breath. Sal turned to face her, and the hatred on his face was so raw, so unfiltered, that several guests near the front took involuntary steps backward. "You think you can walk in here in your pretty dress and take what's mine? I've been with Vincent for 15 years. 15 years I've bled for this organization. I've killed for this organization. And he's going to hand it to you." A woman who answers phones. "Sal, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm done listening. I'm done watching. Tonight things go back to the way they're supposed to be, the way they've always been." He reached into his jacket. Emily saw the movement and knew exactly what was coming. But she didn't run. She didn't even move. Because she also knew something Sal didn't. Tommy Luca appeared behind Sal like a ghost. 58 years old, former boxer hands like anvils. He grabbed Sal's wrist before the gun cleared the jacket and twisted it with a violence that was almost surgical. The weapon clattered to the floor. Sal screamed. Tommy didn't let go. "That's enough, Sal," Tommy said, his voice eerily calm. "Get off me." "This isn't your fight, Tommy." "Yeah, it is. It became my fight the minute you hired 4 strangers to kill a woman who's done more for this organization than you've done in 15 years. The room erupted. Voices overlapping bodies, moving the careful choreography of the evening, dissolving into chaos. Sal's 2 men reached for their weapons, but stopped when they found themselves facing Nico Caruso and 3 of the Caruso family's own soldiers, who had positioned themselves around the room at Nico's instruction during Emily's speech. "I wouldn't," Nico said to the nearest gunman, his voice pleasant, almost friendly. "Not unless you want this evening to end very differently than you planned." The gunman looked at his partner. His partner looked at Sal, who was on his knees with Tommy's grip turning his wrist an unnatural shade of purple. They lowered their hands. Emily walked towards Sal. She stopped 3 feet away and looked down at him. The man who had called her sweetheart. The man who had asked her to fetch him a drink. The man who had hired 4 killers to put bullets in her body tonight. "Sal, do you remember 6 months ago when your shipment from the port was delayed and it cost you $400,000? Sal looked up at her through eyes blurred with pain. "What? That was me. That was paperwork I delayed because you disrespected me at Vincent's dinner. $400,000 because you called me sweetheart." Sal's face went blank. The pain in his wrist was temporarily forgotten, replaced by the dawning realization that the woman standing over him had been operating on a level he never even suspected. "And do you remember 3 months ago when your cousin Frankie was picked up by the police on a weapons charge? A charge that appeared out of nowhere based on an anonymous tip." "That was you," Sal's voice cracked. Frankie was feeding information to the Della Croce family about your operations. I discovered it, but instead of telling you, I removed him. Quietly, cleanly, without anyone knowing. You should have been grateful. Instead, you spent the last 3 months plotting to kill me. She crouched down just as she had with Vincent minutes before. Eye level, close enough to see the blood vessels breaking in his eyes from the pain in his wrist. Here's what's going to happen, Sal. In about 10 minutes, this building is going to be surrounded by federal agents. They have warrants for Vincent for you and for most of the people in this room, but not all of them. I've made arrangements. Some people will walk out of here tonight, some won't. Which category you fall into depends entirely on what you do in the next 60 seconds. What do you want? Sal gasped. I want you to tell every person in this room the truth. Right now, loud enough for everyone to hear. Tell them who really runs Vincent Moretti's organization. Tell them who built the financial systems, who identified the threats, who solved the problems. Tell them the truth about who I am. Sal looked at her with pure hatred. But he also looked at Tommy, whose grip hadn't loosened by a single pound of pressure. And he looked at the room at 200 faces watching him kneel on the floor like a man at confession. She runs it, Sal said through clenched teeth. She runs everything. The money, the logistics, the security. All of it. Vincent makes the decisions, but she makes them work. Without her, the whole thing falls apart. It's been that way for years. We all knew it. None of us wanted to say it. The confession hit the room like a thunderclap. Not because it was surprising, because hearing it spoken aloud, hearing a man like Sal Benedetto admit it while on his knees transformed something that had been whispered into something that could never be denied. Emily stood. She turned to face the room. 200 faces staring at her. Politicians, criminals, business leaders, family heads. People who had spent decades in a world where power was defined by violence and measured in blood. And standing before them in a black dress with no weapon and no army and no family name was a woman who had just dismantled the most powerful criminal organization on the East Coast with nothing but intelligence, patience, and a filing cabinet. At 10:03, the sound Emily had been waiting for finally came. Distant at first, then growing. Sirens, multiple vehicles, the unmistakable sound of law enforcement approaching in force. The room fractured. Some guests moved toward the exits, others reached for phones. The 2 senators who had entered through the side door were already gone, having slipped out within seconds of hearing the first siren, moving with the practiced speed of men who had spent their careers making sure they were never in the room when the room caught fire. Vincent appeared in the doorway of the study. He had heard the sirens too. He looked at Emily across the sea of panicking guests, and in that look was everything fury, betrayal, grudging respect, and something that might have been admiration if he were capable of such a thing. You planned this, he said, not a question. From the day you put my face on the floor. You'll go down too. You were part of all of it. Every transaction, every deal, every shipment. No, Vincent, I won't. Because 18 months ago, I made a phone call to a detective named Ray Castillo. And 6 months ago, I signed an immunity agreement that covers everything I've done in your service. Every document I provided, every piece of evidence I gathered, it was all done under the protection of that agreement. I'm not going down with you. I'm the reason you're going down at all. Vincent Moretti stood perfectly still. The sirens were closer now. 30 seconds, maybe less. Around him, his empire was dissolving like sugar in rain, men he had trusted running for exits alliances he had built over decades crumbling in real time. The entire architecture of his power collapsing under the weight of evidence gathered by a woman he had called nothing. I underestimated you, he said quietly. No, Vincent, you never estimated me at all. That's the difference. You didn't look at me and see someone weak. You didn't look at me and see someone strong. You didn't look at me at all. I was invisible to you, and invisible people, Vincent, they see everything. The front doors burst open. Federal agents poured in, weapons drawn, voices sharp with commands. Guests dropped to the floor. Hands went up. The choreography of arrest replaced the choreography of power. And the ballroom that had hosted deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars became in an instant a crime scene. Tommy released Sal's wrist and stepped back, raising his own hands as agents approached. He looked at Emily one last time and nodded. Just a nod. But in it was everything respect, farewell, and the acknowledgement that she had done something no one in his 30 years had ever managed to do. Emily stood motionless as agents moved around her. One approached her with handcuffs ready. Emily Rivers. Yes, I'm Agent Delgado. Detective Castillo sent me. You're with us. Come with me, please. She walked through the chaos untouched, past Sal face down on the marble, past Franco Caruso sitting calmly with his hands raised, his son Nico beside him, both men watching Emily with expressions that said they would remember this night forever. Past Elena Della Croce, who hadn't moved from her chair, who sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the federal agents swarm around her like they were nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Mrs. Della Croce, Emily said as she passed. Miss Rivers, I'll be in touch. I know you will. Emily walked out the front door and into the night. Behind her, the Belmont estate had become a fortress of flashing lights and raised voices and collapsing empires. Ahead of her was a black sedan with Detective Castillo leaning against the hood. His arms crossed his face, carrying the expression of a man who had just caught the whale he'd been chasing for a decade. You delivered, he said. I always deliver. That's what assistants do. Castillo almost smiled. Almost. There's going to be a lot of paperwork, a lot of depositions, a lot of very angry people who want to know how a woman with no law enforcement training managed to do what my entire department couldn't do in 10 years. I had better access. You had better everything. He opened the car door for her. Get in. We have a long night ahead. Emily paused before getting in. She turned and looked back at the estate one final time. Through the open doors, she could see Vincent being led out in handcuffs. His head was down. His shoulders were slumped. He looked smaller than she had ever seen him, smaller than she had ever imagined he could look. She thought about the girl who had walked into his office 4 years ago, eager and qualified and willing to work harder than anyone. She thought about what that girl had become, not hardened exactly, but refined, compressed, like carbon turned to diamond under impossible pressure. She got in the car and closed the door. Castillo walked around to the driver's side and got in. He started the engine. Where to? He asked. Emily Rivers leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes. For the first time in 4 years, the tension in her shoulders released. Not all of it, but enough to breathe. Forward, she said. The drive from the Belmont estate to the federal building took 22 minutes. Emily counted every one of them. Not because she was anxious, because she was recalibrating. The first phase was over. The explosion had happened. Now came the part that most people forgot about, the part that determined whether the explosion meant anything at all. The aftermath. Castillo drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. Then he glanced at her in the rearview mirror. You know they're going to come after you. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but eventually. Men like Moretti have friends we don't even know about. Friends with long memories and longer reach. I know. And you're okay with that. Detective, I spent 4 years standing next to a man who could have killed me any day of the week for any reason or no reason at all. I ate dinner with murderers. I balanced books for people who solved disagreements with shallow graves. You think I'm afraid of what comes next? Castillo went quiet again. Then he said something Emily didn't expect. My daughter is 26. She just finished law school. She reminds me of you. Terrifyingly competent and absolutely no interest in being told what she can't do. Emily opened her eyes. Is that a compliment? It's a warning. Women like you and my daughter, you change the world. But the world doesn't always appreciate being changed. It pushes back. Hard. I'm counting on it. They arrived at the federal building at 10:41. Emily was escorted to a conference room on the 7th floor where 3 people were already waiting. A woman from the Department of Justice named Patricia Weldon, a senior FBI agent named James Harker, and a man in a rumpled suit who introduced himself only as counsel and didn't specify whose. Patricia Weldon spoke first. She was 53, sharp-featured, with the demeanor of someone who had spent decades building cases that put powerful people in prison. Miss Rivers, I've spent the last 2 hours reviewing the materials your associate uploaded to our secure server. I need to be very clear about something. What you've given us is extraordinary. We're talking about enough evidence to prosecute not just Vincent Moretti, but potentially 30 to 40 individuals connected to his operation. This is the largest organized crime evidence package I've seen in my career. Good, Emily said, but there's a complication. Emily's jaw tightened. There was always a complication. What complication? Agent Harker leaned forward. He was a big man, ex-military with hands that looked like they could crush a telephone book. Two of the individuals implicated in your evidence are currently sitting United States senators. One of them chairs the Appropriations Committee. The other sits on the Intelligence Committee. These aren't small fish, Miss Rivers. These are the kind of fish that, when you try to catch them, they capsize the boat. I'm aware of who they are. I arranged their meetings with Vincent. I drafted the agreements. I have recordings. That's the problem, Patricia said. The recordings. Some of them may have been obtained in violation of state wiretapping laws. If any of that evidence is deemed inadmissible, the entire case could be compromised. Emily reached into her clutch and pulled out a small USB drive. She placed it on the table. This contains documentation showing that every recording was made in a one-party consent state or during phone calls where at least one party was in a one-party consent jurisdiction. I'm not an amateur, Ms. Weldon. I spent 6 months researching federal and state recording laws before I captured a single conversation. Every recording on that server is legal. Every one. Patricia picked up the USB drive and looked at it. Then she looked at Emily. You really did plan for everything. I planned for this conversation. I planned for the exact objection you just raised. I planned for the fact that Agent Harker's first instinct would be to protect the senators, because that's what the Bureau has always done when political figures are involved. And I planned for the fact that the man sitting at the end of this table, who calls himself counsel, is actually from the Office of the Inspector General, which means someone in Washington already knows about tonight and is trying to figure out how much damage control is needed. The man in the rumpled suit stopped writing. He looked up at Emily with an expression that confirmed everything she had just said. Miss Rivers, he said carefully, how did you know who I was? Because I know what fear looks like in an institution. And right now, your institution is terrified. The room went silent. Patricia exchanged a glance with Harker. The Inspector General's man closed his notebook. Emily continued, let me make this simple. I have full immunity. That's not negotiable. It was agreed upon 6 months ago, and it's documented. What I'm offering you in return is not just Vincent Moretti. It's the entire network. Every family, every corrupt official, every international connection. I can give you the Caruso operation, the Della Croce family's financial structure, and the complete supply chain connecting Alejandro Vega's South American network to the Eastern Seaboard. This is a once-in-a-generation case. You can either take it and make history, or you can protect 2 senators and explain to the American public why you chose politics over justice. Patricia Weldon stood up. She walked to the window and stood there for 30 seconds. Then she turned around. We'll take it, all of it, but I need you to testify. Grand jury, possibly trial, multiple trials. I'll testify. You understand what that means. Your face, your name, your entire life becomes public. You won't be able to hide. Ms. Weldon, I spent 4 years hiding. I'm done hiding. At 11:15, Emily asked for a break. She walked to the women's restroom on the 7th floor and locked the door. She stood at the sink and looked at her reflection. The black dress, the careful makeup, the woman who had walked into Vincent Moretti's world as an assistant and walked out as the person who destroyed it. She called Tommy. He answered on the first ring. Emily, thank God. Are you okay? I'm okay. Where are you? They brought me in. I'm at the precinct on 4th Street. They haven't charged me yet. Your detective friend told them to hold off. Tommy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Always. Did you know all those years working for Vincent's father, working for Vincent? Did you ever think about getting out? Tommy was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different, older, tired, the voice of a man carrying decades of weight. Every day, Emily, every single day. But men like me, we don't get out. We don't have the brains for it. We don't have the connections. We just put our heads down and try to survive long enough to collect a pension that doesn't exist. What if I told you there was a way out, a real one? I'd say you already showed me the way out tonight. I just don't know if I deserve to walk through it. You warned me about Sal. You protected me at the party. You stopped him from pulling that gun. Tommy, you're the only person in that entire organization who ever treated me like a human being. If anyone deserves to walk through, it's you. She heard him breathe. a long, shaking breath that sounded like something breaking loose inside his chest. What do you need me to do? I've arranged for your name to be included in my immunity agreement as a cooperating witness. Castillo has the paperwork. You'll need to give a full deposition, everything you know about Vincent's operation going back to his father's time. In exchange, you walk. No charges. Clean record. I've also set aside enough money to cover your expenses for a year while you figure out what comes next. Emily, I can't let you do that. You can't stop me. It's already done. Tommy went silent again. Then in a voice so quiet she could barely hear it, he said, "You're the best person I've ever known in this business. And you shouldn't have had to be in this business at all. Maybe not, but I was. And now I'm making sure it counted for something." She hung up and splashed cold water on her face. She had one more call to make. The hardest one. Her mother answered on the second ring. "Emily, are you safe? Your father and I are at Carol's. We've been watching the news. There's something happening at some estate. Police everywhere. Emily, please tell me you're not involved in whatever that is." "Mom, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be hard to hear." "Oh, God. I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm at a federal building with law enforcement. But Mom, the work I've been doing for the past 4 years, it wasn't what I told you it was. I wasn't working for a consulting firm. I was working for a man named Vincent Moretti. He runs organized crime on the East Coast. And tonight I helped the federal government bring him down." The silence on the other end of the phone was so complete that Emily checked to make sure the call was still connected. "Mom, I knew." Her mother's voice was barely a whisper. Emily's heart stopped. "What?" "I knew, Emily. Not the details, not the specifics. But a mother knows when her daughter is in danger. A mother knows when the smile on her child's face is a mask. I've known for at least 2 years that something was terribly wrong. I just didn't know how to ask. I didn't know if asking would make it worse." Emily pressed her hand against the wall, her vision blurred. 4 years of iron control, 4 years of never breaking, never bending, never allowing a single crack in her armor. And it was her mother's voice that finally found the fracture. "Why didn't you say anything?" Emily whispered. "Because you're my daughter. And I've watched you your entire life. You were the girl who fell off her bicycle at age 6 and got back on before the blood was dry. You were the teenager who worked 3 jobs to save for college when your father got sick. You were the woman who graduated top of her class and then walked into a world that wanted to eat her alive. I didn't say anything because I knew whatever you were doing, you had a reason. And I knew you'd come out the other side." Emily slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor of a federal building bathroom in a black dress that cost more than her mother's car, crying for the first time in 4 years. "I'm coming out the other side, Mom. I'm coming out right now. Yeah, I know. Baby, I know." At midnight, Emily returned to the conference room. Her eyes were clear, her composure was restored. But something was different. Something had shifted inside her, a softness that hadn't been there before coexisting with the steel. She was both things now, the woman who could dismantle an empire and the woman who could cry on a bathroom floor. She didn't have to choose between them anymore. Patricia Weldon had news. "We've made 23 arrests so far tonight. Moretti, Benedetto, 6 of Moretti's lieutenants, 4 Port Authority officials, and 11 associates across 3 crime families. The 2 senators have been contacted by their attorneys, and we expect them to surrender voluntarily by Monday. Alejandro Vega left the country 2 hours ago on a private jet. We're coordinating with Colombian authorities, but I wouldn't hold my breath. Vega will resurface," Emily said. "He's a pragmatist. When the dust settles, he'll want to make a new deal. I can help with that when the time comes." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "You're already thinking about the next move." "Ms. Weldon, I've been 3 moves ahead for 4 years. I don't know how to stop." At 12:30, Agent Harker pulled Emily aside. His tone had changed from skeptical to something approaching deference. "I need to show you something." We pulled Vincent Moretti's personal files from the estate. There was a folder in his desk, locked drawer. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A contingency plan. "For what?" "For you," dated 3 weeks ago. "It outlines a plan to have you eliminated after Saturday's party. The announcement, the underboss title, it was all designed to draw out his enemies. And once they revealed themselves, he planned to withdraw the announcement publicly discredit you, and then arrange for your disappearance within 72 hours. Emily took the paper and read it. Vincent's handwriting, clean, precise, methodical. A plan to end her life, written with the same cold efficiency he applied to everything else. She read it twice. Then she folded it and handed it back. He always was thorough, she said. You don't seem surprised. I'm not. I knew the moment he made that announcement that it was a trap. His left hand touched his jacket pocket. He does that before every betrayal. It's an unconscious habit. He doesn't even know he does it. Harker shook his head slowly. 4 years. You watched him for 4 years and he never once realized what you were. He realized it tonight. That's what matters. At 1:15 in the morning, Detective Castillo drove Emily to a safe house in a quiet neighborhood 12 miles from the city center. It was a small brick house with a blue door and a garden that someone had once loved but had since neglected. 2 federal marshals were stationed outside. Emily would stay here until the grand jury proceedings began. Castillo walked her to the door. He handed her a phone, a new one pre-programmed with 3 numbers. His Patricia Weldon's and a crisis line. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow is going to be long. Detective, can I ask you something? Sure. When I called you 6 months ago and offered you everything, why did you trust me? You didn't know who I was. You had no reason to believe anything I said. Why did you take the risk? Castillo thought about it. Because you didn't sound like someone trying to save herself. You sounded like someone trying to finish something. And in my experience, people who are trying to finish something are the ones telling the truth. He left. Emily walked inside and locked the door. The house was quiet, clean, empty. She stood in the hallway for a long time listening to the silence. It was a different kind of silence than she was used to. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of Vincent's world, where quiet meant someone was watching and waiting. This silence was just silence. Nothing hiding in it. Nothing waiting behind it. She walked to the kitchen and found a kettle. She boiled water. She made tea. She sat at a small table by a window and watched the street outside. A cat crossed the road. A street light flickered. Somewhere a dog barked once and then stopped. She thought about what Elena Della Croce had said. The most dangerous thing in the world is a woman they refuse to see. She thought about Sal on his knees confessing what everyone had known, but no one had said. She thought about Vincent's face when she told him about the Cayman accounts. The exact moment he understood that the person he had dismissed, degraded, humiliated, and planned to kill was the person who had been holding his entire world together. And now she had let go. She thought about Tommy, loyal, simple, brave Tommy, who had spent 30 years in a world that never deserved him and who might finally get the chance to find out what he was without it. She thought about her mother. I knew Emily, a mother knows. And she thought about herself. The woman she had been 4 years ago, walking into Vincent's office for the first time, nervous but determined, carrying a resume full of accomplishments and a heart full of ambition that the world had not yet managed to crush. She thought about what that woman would think if she could see herself now sitting in a safe house at 2 a.m, having just toppled a criminal empire with nothing but patience and a filing cabinet. She thought that woman would be proud and scared and sad, all at the same time. At 2:20, her new phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it. Then she read it. Well played, Miss Rivers. We will meet again. Sincerely, Avi, Alejandro Vega, already reaching out, already positioning for the next chapter. Emily read the message 3 times, then deleted it. She would deal with Vega later. There would be time. There would be plenty of time. She finished her tea. She washed the cup. She placed it upside down on the drying rack. A small act, a domestic act, the kind of act she hadn't performed in 4 years because her life had not permitted domesticity. It felt foreign. It felt wonderful. She walked to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. She took off her shoes, the heels she had worn to walk through a ballroom and dismantle an empire. She set them neatly by the door. She removed the recording device from her clutch and placed it on the nightstand. Its green light was still blinking. She turned it off. Then Emily Rivers did something she hadn't done in 1,461 days. She lay down, she closed her eyes, and without planning, without strategizing, without calculating the next move, or anticipating the next threat, or preparing for the next battle, she fell asleep. The next morning, the sun came through the window at 6:45, and found her still in the black dress, still on top of the covers, sleeping the deep and dreamless sleep of a woman who had finally set down a weight she had been carrying for 4 years. The story was already on the news. Every channel, every website, every front page. The largest organized crime bust in a decade. 31 arrests, 2 senators under investigation, an international manhunt for a Colombian kingpin, and at the center of it all, a name no one had ever heard before. Emily Rivers, former assistant, current earthquake. In a holding cell downtown, Vincent Moretti sat on a metal bench and stared at the wall. His attorney had come and gone. His associates had lawyered up or disappeared. His empire, the thing he had spent 20 years building, was in pieces. And the person who had torn it apart was the same person who had built it. He thought about the night he had pressed her face against the floor. He had done it to establish dominance, to remind her and everyone watching that he was the power and she was the tool. He had looked down at her bleeding lip and felt nothing. Not cruelty, not satisfaction, nothing. Because she was nothing, that was his mistake. Not the violence, not the humiliation, the nothing. The absolute certainty that a person could be dismissed, degraded, and reduced to an object without consequence. The belief that power flows only in one direction, and the people at the bottom stay at the bottom because the people at the top decided they should. Vincent Moretti had built his empire on that belief, and Emily Rivers had burned it to the ground with the same belief turned inside out. She was awake now, sitting at the kitchen table, drinking tea. Watching the morning light hit the neglected garden through the window, her phone buzzed with messages she would answer later. Patricia Weldon with scheduling details. Castillo checking in. Tommy free on bail asking if she was okay. She was okay. For the first time in 4 years, she was genuinely, completely, irreversibly okay. She picked up the phone and called her mother. "I'm coming to Vermont, not today, maybe not this week, but soon. We'll be here, Emily. We'll always be here." She hung up. She looked at the garden. Something could grow there, she thought. Something could grow there if someone paid attention to it. Emily Rivers took a breath. She let it out. And she began. Because the most dangerous thing in the world was never the man with the gun, or the money, or the name. The most dangerous thing in the world was the woman they refused to see. The one who stood quietly in the corner, memorizing every face, learning every secret, building every system, waiting for the exact right moment to step out of the shadow and into the light. And once she stepped into the light, she never went back.